Aloha, and welcome to another edition of A Better Day. I'm State Senator Sam Slom, and for the next half hour, I hope you'll stay with us because we've got a really interesting program. Well, look, we're still in the interim, between sessions. We don't start again till mid-January of next year. But we've got hearings, we've got briefings, we meet with constituents, and there's a lot of things going on. Now, first of all, you remember that for the last couple of weeks, actually for 15 years, people have been complaining about and talking about air conditioning in the schools. Well, guess what? It's gotten cooler and rainier and all that, but it's still an issue and it still has to be resolved. And the good old DOE, God bless them, they keep trying to blame the legislature for lack of funding. But the legislature gave them funding, and specifically for air conditioning. They chose, however, to use their priorities and do something different. And that's part of the problem with lump sum budgeting for some of these governmental agencies. You may have also seen the story about the dilapidated building at the University of Hawaii Manoa campus for education and the arts and so forth. And you had rat droppings and you had things falling out of the ceiling, and it just was not good. Here's a secret. Politicians love to come to the opening of things, new construction, cut that miley-lay and all, but it's operation and maintenance that must be taken care of. But here again, I saw the university president, and he was blaming the legislature and saying, we didn't get enough money and we got $400 million in backlog. Look, the legislature has addressed that problem. And once again, the legislature has appropriated money, CIP, capital funds, operating funds, but it's what the university has chosen to do with those funds. So when we come back next year, we're going to talk with our guest about what some of those issues may be, but it's always about the money. What's going on right now also? I hope that you plan to attend one of the PUC hearings revolving around the Hawaiian Electric and Nextel plan merger. It's interesting because a number of agencies and the governor have come out against that merger, but there's still a lot of time to go, still a lot of input, and the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission, they want your input. You may recall that last month my guest was Randy Iwasi, who is the chairman of the PUC, and he had a lot to say about that, but you've got to participate. And by the way, for those of you that may be new, the reason we call this show A Better Day is because anybody can have a different day, a new day, a good day. We want you to have a better day. And I know that many of you are still suffering. The economy is not piping along. Yeah, economically, we're doing well with the visitor industry and all that, but we still have problems, and small business is struggling. So there's a lot of things that we can improve. Well, who's going to help us make the improvements? I know. It could be the Senate President. And we're really happy today and really honored to have Mr. Ron Kouchi, State Senator from Kauai, and the newly elected President of the Hawaii State Senate. Ron, welcome.
Thank you, Sam. It's a pleasure to be here.
Listen, I understand this is the first time you've done TV here.
Yes,
yeah?
it is.
And you've got a face for TV. This could be great. Why don't you give us very briefly a little Kouchi 101, a little bit about your background, because I find it fascinating and very diversified.
Well, I was elected to the Kauai County Council and started on January 2nd of 1983 and served through 2002. Unsuccessfully ran for mayor in 2002, got elected to the first elected Kauai Island Utility Cooperative Board, served there for 3 years, went back to the council for 2 years, didn't get re-elected then, and then when the seat opened up for the state senate on Kauai, I was appointed by Governor Lingle in September of
Republican Lingle appointed Democrat Kouchi,
in
right?
2010, and then won the 2010 election and was fortunate enough to get re-elected in 2012. So I've now served 5 sessions in the Hawaii State Senate.
Well, and you've served well, and you've been on major committees, including Ways and Means. You've had a lot to do with those decisions. But going back to your background a little bit, you went to college in Iowa. Drake?
Yes.
How did you choose Drake?
You do the practice SAT as a junior, and I was getting letters about dear senior to be based on your scores. This may be a school that would be interesting for you, there wasn't the internet to get virtual tours of schools. And so I'd asked for the catalog from several schools, which included Drake. In December or November, I get a letter that the Vice Dean of Admissions is going to be on my campus this day, and if you'd like to meet with him, he'll be available. And I later found out that he would spend 2 weeks during December in Hawaii with his wife. University would pay for half of his trip, and from 8 in the morning till noon, he would call on high schools throughout the state, island hop, and then he'd have the afternoon to enjoy the warm Hawaii weather with his wife. And so he had a working vacation. I also found out why he's so good at his job. He made snow sound interesting, and at the end of the day, there was a good financial package that made going to Drake affordable. And so I went off and
What did you major in?
U.S. history,
US
and
history.
I wanted to be a sports coach.
Really? And
In
so
high school.
did a Kauai boy do okay in corn country?
The people in the Midwest were just fabulous, and the school closed during the Thanksgiving vacation, so every Thanksgiving someone was gracious enough to invite me to go back to their home. Got involved in playing volleyball, and who would know that in Iowa there was a hotbed of volleyball going on. I coached at a small
I understand. Yeah, you
small
coached.
college.
Was it a women's
Women's-
volleyball?
Back in the Title IX days, there were no men's volleyball programs in Iowa because of not having enough women's sports. There were a few places. Ohio State was a power. Ball State back then was a power. Penn State, but very few places outside of the West Coast
Yeah.
actually had men's collegiate
Well, I
volleyball.
know you're a consummate baseball fan, football fan, volleyball fan. So you take care of all of the sports. And you say at one point you considered coaching as a career.
Well, just to be a high school teacher and high school coach.
Yeah.
For me, I was during college a setter, and what was a great life building skill is you need to make instant decisions about who gets the ball, surveying the defense, and doing everything else. And so while I appreciate all of my teachers going to Waimea High School and the professors at Drake University, I certainly learned a lot of valuable lessons on the athletic field and courts.
And probably still are. Yeah. Hey, listen, tell us a little bit about your family. I know you're very proud of them.
Well, my wife and I got married in November of 1987, so next month will be our 28th wedding anniversary. We have 2 sons. Dan is with Senator Hirono in Washington, D.C., and Egan is back home working with my brother at Gardenal Disposal. Dan went to a small school outside of Boise, College of Idaho, and Egan went to Western Oregon. So 2 great boys, never called to the principal's office once, and their mom did a great job in raising them.
Yes, I know their mom, know your wife. She's wonderful, Joy. Anyway, I miss you. You used to sit next to me in the Senate, and the only thing I didn't like was that when they did reapportionment last time, you took my Senate District 8, right? Now you're 8 and I'm 9, and us Chinese, the 8 is very lucky.
Yes.
It's very lucky for us. Okay, so now you're coach. Since May of this year, you've been coach, you've been president of the Senate. How is that different from what you had done previously?
Well, as the senator for Kauai and Niihau, the first thing you do is go in and assess what are the issues or needs of your district. You go in and you work hard to make sure you're addressing your district's concerns while doing the balance of looking at the state and the overall needs. As president of the Senate, all of a sudden everybody's issues now become very important to you, and if you're going to be successful, then you need to help 24 other people get across the goal line too, and you just
So you're still
can't be
coaching.
focused on
You're still
on
coaching,
yourself.
right,
Yes.
Coach? Yeah. Well, and you are I believe, the 14th Senate president, and I've had the pleasure of serving under, I think, 6 Senate presidents. I don't know what that tells you about my longevity, because I still support term limits. But it was an interesting year. During the interim, we still have issues, as I mentioned earlier, that are going on. I find it interesting, though, particularly, number one, first of all, nobody's a better cheerleader for Kauai than you are. I remember there was never a committee meeting that went by that somehow, some way, you didn't get the Garden Island involved in there or congratulate somebody. And that's good. That's what a good legislator does. He or she represents their district, knows the people within the district, and tries to emphasize and focus on the good things that are happening, even if there are problems. You served on the Kauai Cooperative, on the energy cooperative, and during this planned or proposed $4 billion takeover by NextEra of Hawaiian Electric, the governor has come out against this already. So has the Department of Business, Economic Development, the Consumer Advocate, a number of other agencies and individuals. There's hearings going on right now, as I mentioned. But one of the things that a lot of people brought up is, why can't we have a cooperative? And the argument has been, well, yeah, it works on Kauai, but it would be more difficult on Oahu because of the size and everything else. What are your thoughts?
Well, working backwards and being a good politician, I'll start by not answering your question.
Oh, that's great.
Actually, when they first announced it over a year ago,
Yeah.
I remember a group of legislators were at Senator Hirono's office in D.C. for the NCSL meetings, and when she asked, what do you think about the takeover? My reaction at that point was, first, as we look at the Big Island and Maui, knowing what we did on Kauai, I believe that that was a great opportunity for those two counties to look at cooperative ownership. When Isel hit, and back in August of last year or July, then I had called Mayor Kinoi to say, you know, you really need to look at cooperative ownership at that time. One of the reasons why we paid the highest rates for meters of 30,000 or less across the country for a long time.
By far. Right.
In 1982, we were hit with Hurricane Eva. In 1992, Hurricane Iniki was even more devastating. And as an investor-owned utility, we as ratepayers needed to rebuild our own system. And without that assistance, we had to fund all of the capital costs to do it. One of the advantages of being a cooperative in a time of natural disaster, cooperatives qualify for FEMA assistance, and you'd have 75% of your costs coming in from the federal government to assist you if you're at a level where the president declares a disaster. So that in and of itself is a key component. And then when you look at the renewable penetration, the amount of solar and the programs that are being run on Kauai, because we're member-owned, member-driven, you know, I think that there's tremendous community benefit that would be available. Now, I don't know how to answer the question if Oahu would be too big or not to be cooperatively owned, because I didn't do that kind of research that we did. But when the decision was being made, I was county council chair on Kauai. The other model that we looked at very carefully, and it was a difficult choice to make, was a municipal ownership as well. So cooperative ownership isn't the only avenue available.
That's a good point.
Municipal ownership is available. In Virginia, there is NRECA, the National Rural Electrical Agency. They work with cooperatives, not just in the United States, but cooperatives around the world. There are 119 electric cooperatives in the Philippines. We send resources from the United States to many different countries. We understand economic development is driven by electricity and that ability, and so we're trying to help lift up the standard of living in other countries. And in Washington, D.C., there's a headquarters for the municipal ownership, so there's a lot of resources available to help pursue and look at other forms of ownership.
Are you concerned at all about the sustainability of Hawaii's electric grid?
Well, the most important thing is to upgrade the grid itself. Here on Oahu, one of the biggest problems is that the grid is not at a place where it can take in the amount of solar that people want to convert to. So obviously upgrading the grid is important. There was, I would say, some modest controversy on Kauai when we were converting to the smart meters. When they actually put something on the ballot, it was overwhelmingly supported that this smart meter conversion continue to go forward, and so we're way ahead of the rest of the state.
You did say smart meter, you didn't say smart liters, right?
Yeah,
because
smart
that was
meters,
never on the ballot.
yeah. Smart meters and upgrading the grid is critical. Even at the Pacific Missile Range, military bases have a mandate to convert to green energy in the next 10 years. And they are now investing in upgrading just the grid within the base so that they can take in some of these renewable alternative energies, and that needs to be done here on Oahu and statewide if we're going to convert to a 100% renewable goal that we adopted.
We'll have to wait and see. Our special guest is Senate President Ron Kouchi of Kauai, and you mentioned the missile station on Kauai. That really is a bright spot, not only for Kauai and the state, but also nationally as well.
Well, and we also celebrated last month the 10th anniversary of what we refer to as the golf ball in Pearl Harbor. And with the threat of North Korea and their nuclear capability, it's critically important that we are able to protect our citizens and the west coast of the United States.
You and I share concerns on a number of vital issues. One of them that's been in the news recently and still is, has to do with the proposed expansion by NOAA of the whale sanctuary. Now, a lot of publicity was focused on Moanalua Bay in East Honolulu, where I'm from, but this has ramifications for Kauai and for Maui and the other islands as well.
Well, and it's odd, ironic. On September 10th, when I got the call from Governor Lingle that she was appointing me, the first meeting I went to was a NOAA briefing at the Lehui Civic Center. And so on Kauai, we've been actually actively engaged in this issue.
This is 5 years,
yes.
Right?
And it seemed like we were the only ones at that time, and we were getting difficulty in people, really understanding the concern about what was happening. With the humpback whale sanctuary, we've actually seen a repropagation, and a day where we may even be able to delist the humpback whales.
I know Senator Malama Solomon brought that up in the 2014 session.
And the other thing that's important is when we talk about potential delisting or expanding the sanctuary, the Endangered Species Act is a federal law that is in place and affords protection to any endangered species today. And so no matter what we do with the sanctuary, that does not take away the protections of the Endangered Species Act. And that's one of the things that we've been trying to advocate, is that there are enough laws in place and adequate protection. One of the things that they were trying to do on Kauai is to include the Hawaiian monk seals. Well, when you calculate the 120, give or take, pounds of fish a Hawaiian monk seal consumes on a daily basis, and then multiply it out through the 365 days, and then add in how many monk seals that we have, then they actually would consume more fish than the fishermen are catching.
That's a good point. I haven't heard anybody bring that out.
And we've tried to bring that out on Kauai, and we say that the depletion is not a result of overfishing. There's also issues about the damage to the reefs from other runoffs that occur, and there are a multitude of factors. And but they seem, or I think by the law, they're only allowed to look at the fishermen. And so, we felt that it's been a challenge in being heard. But we're optimistic now that others have joined in, that they've been paying attention. I know that Senator Schatz and his chief of staff, Andy Weiner, who used to be the director at NOAA, have been paying close attention. Senator Hirono has come out to meetings on Kauai, Congresswoman Gabbard, and
we've been having
a lot
meetings
of
here at
attention.
the legislature in the interim.
One tomorrow.
Yeah, but look, I know you're going to stand side by side with me. Forget the monk seals for a minute, okay? think about the Opeapea. Now, we worked long and hard to make this little bat, which is only that big, the Opeapea, the only native Hawaiian land mammal, make that the official state mammal, which we did this past year with your help. But now I am so distressed, Senator Kouchi, because I read that on Maui, these wind turbines are killing birds and Opeapea at a record rate, and they're coming before the PUC to allow more kills. Now, will you stand for the Opeapea? Can I depend on you to do that?
I'll be right behind you.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought. What about the health connector and the problems that the health exchange had here and all that? It's been extended for another year, but with the idea that the federal government really is going to take over the connector. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the overall thoughts is the delivery of health care, whether it's through the connector, how we're going to insure people, and the state hospital system is enormous. And clearly, as we go into the next session, you know, the whole cost associated with healthcare and the state's responsibility is going to be a huge issue. The other thing that was surprising to me when you look at all sources of funding, now human services has exceeded education as using the most money in our budget, and clearly as the boomers are retiring and we'll have more and more people going into the system and accessing service, how we're going to do that is going to be very complicated and expensive. So I don't have the plan right now, but clearly, you know, it's something that we're going to have to work through in the next session, and Roz Baker has a large job ahead of her as the chair.
Let's talk about that, because the next session is coming up in mid-January. Boy, this summer has gone by very quickly. What do you see as the key issues, and what would you like to get done during 2016?
Well, clearly dealing with the homeless is going to be critically important. I know that Finance Chair Sylvia Luke and Ways and Means Chair Jill Tokuda have indicated to the governor that we have $5 million that they've identified that he could start with now, and we'd get an emergency appropriation put together as soon as we come back in. But clearly there are mental health issues that are involved in part of the homeless situation that we have, in the cuts that the legislature and governor had to make during the financial difficulties we've experienced. Mental health certainly has taken a big hit, and as you say, being a cheerleader for not just the good but the bad things about Kauai. I know when we're talking about maybe reducing mental health funding again, I brought up the fact that 4 or 5 years ago, Kauai had the highest suicide rate per capita in the nation, and that there are mental health issues, that it's important. We need to fund it, and I think that the biggest task that we have as the majority is coming up with a plan before January 1st of how we're going to deal with the homeless. And clearly the bottom line to that plan is more physical beds available, because even though you try to move them, in this particular case out of Kaka'ako, you know, they need to go somewhere where we can start helping them.
So all
transition.
those things require money.
Yes.
We're going to have a supplemental budget. The revenue estimates don't show us diversifying our economy or increasing new ways of producing economic development. What's your suggestion on that?
We're hopeful that some of the money we've invested in the small business grants and some of the commitment to high growth and the tech sector will pay off. But in the short term, I don't think we have any way around committing some of the record tourism dollars to deal with this issue in dealing with the homeless. The second area that is going to be important, we talked about the delivery of health care, whether it's how do we deal with the connector and the insurance and the state hospitals, what's going to happen A, with the UPW lawsuit, or B, what will be the results of the negotiation between Maui Hospital and Kaiser, and how do we deal with the rest of those hospitals statewide?
Everybody's going to be looking at that because the problem is still statewide and still continues.
Well, I was going to say another area is what are we going to do with pre-K? And the constitutional amendment didn't pass. I was in favor of giving ourselves the opportunities for public-private partnerships were appropriate, but the people have been clear on what they'd like us to do. So now, how do we put it together? And
well, it's still very
that's going to cost
costly.
money as well. And then, as you've already mentioned, we have the competing uses. It's not just about getting air conditioning for a better learning environment for our students, but because of the age of most of our buildings statewide for schools, to get that broadband connectivity to allow our students access to the internet so that they can use the tablets and the laptops that we've been trying to get them. It doesn't make any sense to give them all of these tools and then they can't get to the internet, and then
if you don't have the
obviously
capacity or whatever.
And then at the University of Hawaii, how do we continue to do the maintenance that's required there?
Our guest has been State Senator and Senate President Ron Kouchi. We took a little look at 2016. We wish you luck and wish us luck. You having any problems with the 24 Democrats that make up the majority?
Well, no. It's all wonderful.
How about that pesky Senate minority? You got any problems with them?
Well, the Senate minority is the one person that I have a lot in common with. I love when you stand up and say your Senate minority is in unanimous agreement.
That's scary. And on that note, we're going to end. We thank you for joining us today for A Better Day. Thank you, Senator Kouchi.
Thank you.